right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this regular meeting of the El Paso MPO. Today is Friday, April 20th. It is 9:02 a.m. This session is now in order. We can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Open comment?
I have Mr. Michael Rooney and Mr. John Iberg. Okay. And remember, just a reminder, we have 3 minutes, okay?
Oh, I've got this down. That's right. Time it, please.
Okay.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everybody. MPO, honored guests, and the media and everything. I want to compliment you on doing such a great job. I did bike tour, mini bike tour, and I camped out last night over by Oñate's Crossing, and I really like how you're repurposing and using the hacienda, the restaurant. The officers' quarters are not torn down. It's all things are not all terrible. So keep up the good work. And don't forget to make our roads multimodal. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
We're good. Thank you very much.
Okay, don't forget that we have the International Fort Hancock Las Cruces I-10 bicycle bypass. No bicycle should be on Interstate 10 between Texas exit 72 and New Mexico exit 136. We have all the routes all paved. It's all connected. Thank you very much. And what you're really doing is enhancing our hidden gem of the world, crossroads of North America, anchored by El Paso, Ciudad Juarez, and Las Cruces. And hopefully we'll get tens of thousands of people here bicycling for Boundary 23. Thank you again.
Minute and 22 seconds.
Oh, I got more time. I apologize. My name is John Iberg, a.k.a. Juanito Iberg, a.k.a. Biker John. And I am a taxpayer and a voter and a dynamic participant in seeing our community go forward, and you're doing a big part of it. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, sir.
Do I still have time? Okay. Thank you.
Is anybody else for open comment?
No one else.
Fantastic. Okay. Under discussion and action, approve the motions and minutes for March 23rd, 2018. Is there a motion on the floor to approve? There's a motion on the floor to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been seconded. Any discussion by the board? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 1 has been approved. Item number 2?
Item number 2 is discussion and action to adopt the draft public participation plan and the draft program management plan for the Federal Transit Administration, Section 5310, Enhanced for Mobility for Seniors and Individuals with Disabilities for the El Paso region, your urbanized area.
Good morning, Christina Stokes from El Paso MPO. Just a reminder as to what these documents are. The public participation plan, that outlines the strategies and activities that are used by the MPO to engage the public in transportation planning and decision-making process. So the public involvement for this document was conducted for a 45-day period, and that ended on March 6th. The program management plan describes how the MPO process describe the MPO's process for managing the 5310 program and the roles and responsibilities for both the MPO as the direct recipients of the funds, as well as the subrecipients or awardees of the grant. So the public involvement for this was conducted for 30 days, and this ended on February 19th. The MPO did not receive comments from the public for either of these documents, so the MPO is requesting the adoption of these documents by the Transportation Policy Board.
I know that you didn't receive any public comments. How about the recipients of the 5310? Just anecdotally, have you received any comments from them from changes or
No.
What's working?
No.
Everybody's happy, just give me the
Right.
money.
The only comments we did receive were just technical comments from New Mexico DOT, which were just some clarifications and maybe some typos and things, but nothing major.
Okay, great. Move to approve.
I have a motion on the floor. Second. The motion has been seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Item number 2 has been approved.
Thank you.
Next is item number 3, the report for Reimagine I-10 study, and that'll be presented by TxDOT and their consultant.
Good morning, board members. My name is Hugo Hernandez. I am the project manager for TxDOT on Reimagine I-10. Reimagine I-10 is a corridor study that covers 55 miles. It starts at the New Mexico state line all the way to the Tornillo FM 3380 area. And this is just going to be a brief presentation of the advances that we've had so far. Along with this, we have HDR, Brian, and he's going to give you a brief presentation of what the advances have been. Bob, I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, let me just give you a little preview here. One of the things that's happening is that over the TIP and the MTP, we have projects in all 4 segments that you're going to hear about for I-10 in this area from the state line to Tornillo. Those projects don't come close to solving our issues, but we're constrained financially because the MPO has to have a financial constraint in their program. The only way we break that is to get the commission to give us additional money as they develop the UTP. Now, fortunately, the UTP is in a bit of turmoil right now. There's been a lot of rediscussion as to what is going to be in there. But we need to get in front of the commission with something more than just a wish list. We need to have something behind that wish list. Now, this project started over a year ago, and I'm pushing the team to get us more and more detail so that I have something to say to the commission that identifies what our real needs are versus what is in the MTP right now to find a way to cover that gap. So you're going to see some things in here that are looking at 2042, but I'd caution you to be careful because the larger parts of this program, it's going to take anywhere from 10 to 15 years to get through the planning, the environmental process, the design process, and into construction to actually get them on the ground. So some of these, even if we started today, we probably couldn't get on the ground until 2035. So what that says is if we just get by in 2042, we only have 7 years of life. And this is probably the last shot we're going to have at I-10. So I have tasked this group to look beyond that, to try to give us something that'll give us something very comfortable in 2042 so that we'll have at least a few years after that, maybe a life longer than 7 years. You're also going to see some exotic components to this or possibilities. I would caution you that in the downtown area, anything you see over I-10, that's not TxDOT paying for it. That'll be local. So when you see those, just keep that in mind. And with that, Brian, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Bob. My name is Brian Swedell, HDR's project manager for this project. And I did want to kind of talk a little bit about the Reimagine project. And I know some of y'all have been familiar with it and have been to some of our previous meetings. But Reimagine I-10 was named on purpose because we're looking at 30 years into the future on how we're going to address the issues on I-10 and how do we look at this project going forward, because it may be one of the last projects that's done on I-10 for a very long time. So we want to make sure that we're addressing it in the right way and we're addressing the correct issues, because we do need to work at solving the problem. I am going to go through a quick corridor study background and show some information on that. and then walk through a couple of other things, and then we'll get to the downtown area and talk a little bit about the downtown area, because we wanted to emphasize that because it is a unique area along I-10 that we want to address. From the corridor study background, I don't have to tell you guys here that there's a lot of population growth that's going on, and it seems, according to our analysis, that's going on in the segment 1. And let me back up and talk a little bit about the segments of the I-10 corridor, because you'll be hearing that throughout the presentation. We basically divided the I-10 segment up into 4 pieces. One is from the New Mexico state line to Executive Center Boulevard. That's segment 1. Segment 2 is from Executive Center to US 54. And then segment 3 is from 54 to Loop 375 on the east end, and then the 4th segment is from 375 down to Tornillo. And so that's how we've kind of divided up. Each of those segments kind of have their unique characteristics and may require unique handling and solutions, and so that's the way we looked at it. But the population growth, as you can see from the map on the left, is really concentrated on segment 1 and at least on the north part of segment 4. However, the employment growth still follows the I-10 corridor. I-10 corridor is still going to be that vital lifeline in El Paso that it has been. There's been a lot of we looked at the worker flow map and where the jobs are at and where they're coming from. And as we looked at that, the majority of the project, or the majority of the employment is staying here in the El Paso area. We have some that's coming employment that's reaching outside, and we have some that is leaving this area as well. But the majority of it's staying here. And once again, the worker area profile map is once again centered on I-10. And I know this is not new to you guys. One of the other things we wanted to look at are the age of the infrastructure, not only the pavement, but the bridges, especially the bridges. When you look at the El Paso area, 36% of the bridges are less than 50 years old. Whereas the statewide average, it's almost 60% or less than 50 years old. So there's a really need to take a look at the infrastructure in the area. The good news is that the sufficiency ratings on the structure still remains high, so we do have some life left in them. But when we're looking at a study that's 30 years into the future, we need to start coming up with a plan to replace that infrastructure. And so that's one of the things the study is going to do. Also, we want to take a hard look at safety, and in particular the crashes and fatalities, especially in light of yesterday. We know there was a fatality in segment 1 up near the New Mexico, up near Arcraft Road. And we want to take a look at how we can improve that on I-10 and make sure that we've addressed that. We've got it broken out by segment here on this graph, and you can see that segments 1 and 2 are very similar as far as numbers of crashes over an average over 4 years. But segment 3 is quite a bit higher. And as we're looking at the study, one of the big reasons for this, we feel, is there's an enormous number of ramps in segment 3. There's a lot of friction that's going on in that segment from US 54 to Loop 375. This friction creates a lot of speed variations, and it creates some issues that we want to address. And so that's one of the things we're paying a lot of attention to. So crashes is also one of those things we want to take a look at. We started this study by looking at 6 main goals and objectives that we wanted to accomplish on this. One of them is obviously mobility and circulation, how we improve that, not just on I-10, but also in the areas just adjacent to I-10 and some of the major corridors that parallel I-10. We want to make sure we're being good stewards of the environment. I want to look at multimodal. We want to make sure that we've addressed how transit plays into this, how we're addressing truck traffic, as well as the bicycle and pedestrian component. We want to look at design. One of the key things we're dealing with on this study is the new requirement to have 18.5-foot clearance on major freight routes. And so that's one of the things we're looking at, which specifically impacts the downtown area when you've got all the bridges that are going over there right now. Want to look at value. How can this project bring value to the area, not only from a employment and business development, but also how can we get buy-in and participation from the private sector into helping solve our problem as well? And that's one of the things we wanted to take a look at. And then lastly is technology. The project's going to last for 30 years into the future. There's no telling what technology is going to do between now and then. We need to make sure that we've made it adaptable and flexible to adjust and react to those kinds of changes. Everything from what we call enhanced ITS, which is a lot more fiber down the roadway to address some of the driver notification. but also things like that are out there, such as autonomous and connected vehicles, and how does that come into play with a solution that we might have on this corridor as well. We rolled this out to our stakeholders at our stakeholder group, and we asked them what are the top 3 goals and objectives that you feel like that we need to focus on the most. And the ones that are highlighted in red are the ones that came back: mobility, multimodal, and design. Those were the top 3 that came back. Not that the others aren't important, but those were the 3 that rose to the top. Similarly, we met with the public at several different public involvement venues, and we asked them a similar question. And in all 3 segments, the answer came back that traffic, safety, and connectivity were the 3 major pieces that were worrying the citizens and that needed to be paid attention to. It's interesting that in all 4 segments, those 3 were the top. Segment 2 was the same, except connectivity came to the top, and you might expect that with the downtown area in segment 2, and that connectivity is an important component. So that was kind of the background of the study. I want to get a little bit into the no-build scenario to kind of emphasize what it is, the problem and the issues that we're trying to solve. Many of you are probably familiar with the term level of service, but I wanted to kind of talk briefly that it's really just kind of a report card on traffic condition, where A is a free flow and F is really pretty much gridlock in the corridor. So what you're looking at here is a map of segment 1 with 2042 traffic shown on it if we don't do anything to the corridor. And you can see that really from Arcraft Road to the downtown area is really going to be operating in a level service F or gridlock condition with the 2042 traffic. So there's an issue there that we need to resolve. I move on to segment 2, which is the downtown from Executive Center to US 54. And you can see it's pretty much all red. I mean, it's pretty much all level service F throughout that segment of the corridor. Similarly, in segment, well, let me pause for a second and show a traffic simulation model that we developed for segment 2 from Executive Center down to US 54. And this really kind of highlights the problem that we're trying to solve. And what you see is on the eastbound side, severe congestion, obviously gridlock condition, starting at Executive Center Boulevard. And what you'll see is it goes all the way through the downtown area. You might say, well, that's great, but look at the westbound side. That looks like it's flowing pretty good. Well, what you'll see in a minute is why it's flowing good is because it's being blocked from a ramp that's congested in the background. Yes, sir.
Was this taken yesterday?
It could have been. So this is a familiar thing that you'll see, and I'll let it run through the downtown area. But you'll see this is approaching UTEP right here, the Schuster Road. Then as you approach the downtown area, it continues to get bad. And then once you get east of downtown, between downtown and US 54, you can see the congestion on both sides is really significant.
Brian, you might want to add that this assumes the Border West has been built.
True.
Go 10 is finished. All of the projects that are currently planned or under construction have been implemented.
So you can see right here coming into the picture why the westbound was so nice. It's because it's been blocked by the Missouri ramp and on the model that we were showing. So now you're in that piece from downtown to US 54, and we're really, both sides are really backed up. But like Bob said, this is not addressing the construction. This is not construction driven. It's got all the major projects that are planned included in the model, and that's what we're seeing in 2042. So it shows that there's still an issue that it's got to be resolved. I'm going to go ahead and move forward to segment 3 because we have a very similar issue on segment 3. And as I mentioned before, segment 3, the big culprit we feel in segment 3 is the number of ramps in that area. We have a ramp density in that area that's below 1 mile, which is very densely packed ramping. So as you'll see in a minute, one of our solutions is to address that ramping component. But because of all that friction, we're seeing level of service F throughout segment 3 as well. And similarly in segment 3, and I'm not going to run through all this, but you can see a similar story that we've got congestion on both sides. Not only congestion on both sides, but we also have, you see major impacts to the arterials, such as Zaragoza and Lee Trevino Boulevard, and all of those arterials that are connecting. It's really not only affecting I-10, it's backing up and affecting the entire network that's associated with I-10. With I-10 carrying 33% of the vehicle miles traveled in the El Paso area, it's a very important piece, and it's creating an issue when we look at the 2042 traffic model. And then segment 4 is the news is better in segment 4. There's a lot of green south of Horizon Boulevard. It really functions pretty well, and in 2042 it still functions pretty well. There's some other issues in segment 4 that we want to address, such as the development and the growth that's projected down there. So we want to make sure that we've addressed that in segment 4 moving forward. So what do we do to resolve those issues? We looked at a number of things, and we're still in the process of doing that. We're not to the final solution yet by any means, but really the feasibility study really has 3 layers that we're looking at. One is operational improvements, which means ramp consolidation, reconfiguration, bottleneck removal, those things that we can address that are kind of high level. But then we also want to take a look at corridor wide. What can we do? Things like added capacity or adaptive lanes, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But then also that technology component that I mentioned as well. And the idea is that we can come up with a program of projects that can be built over time that leads to an overall solution, but it takes advantage of funding that's available and is able to keep pace with the future forecasted travel demand as we go. And that's kind of the idea behind the study. So with that, we looked at the operational improvements, and our first blush of this to solve this problem is we looked at removing 35 total ramps along the corridor. And I will remind you, it's a 55-mile corridor, so it's a long corridor where those 35 ramps are being removed. But we looked at trying to consolidate ramps and to address those issues. When we consolidated ramps, we did take a look at the resulting impacts to the intersections to make sure that we weren't loading up an intersection as well. So that was taken on as well. We enhanced 16 ramps, which means we basically added some auxiliary lanes to make the ramps function better. And we relocated 77 ramps. We just moved them slightly to make them function better as well. We also looked at cross-street improvements. I mentioned the interchanges, but also looking at how those intersections work. We looked at possibilities for innovative and more efficient type of intersections, such as single-point urban interchanges or diverging diamond interchanges at places like Arcraft Road or Hawkins or Zaragoza, just a couple of areas that we're looking at, and there are some others that we're looking at as well. But all of these kind of go into that operational component of the solution. By doing those operational improvements and addressing those issues, we were actually, the brown in this slide indicates the no build if we don't do anything. And you can see that we really have a level surface that's trending heavily to level surface F. By doing these operational improvements, we really have having a trend to the level service C and D, which is where we want to be in a 2042 corridor study. That's the most efficient way to handle that corridor. I'm not going to go through these slides, but these slides kind of depict a little bit of where we address the ramping, and I'll be happy to stay afterwards and talk to anybody about that. But we really looked at the ramping along each corridor. In segment 1, we looked at some innovative things. I will point out that we provided the continuous frontage roads in the area over there near Executive Center where the frontage roads aren't continuous that kind of help address incident management, among other things. Segment 2, including the downtown area, we looked at a number of things as well, and we'll talk more about the downtown area in a minute, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. But we did look at some ramp consolidation and some frontage road extension through the downtown area as well. I will point out in the downtown area, we're proposing right now to use Yandell as the the westbound frontage road. And provide that frontage road connection through there, and also connect Wyoming up with the frontage road through adjacent to the UP yard there as well, to provide continuous frontage roads all the way through that area and provide good access and connectivity there. Segment 3, as I mentioned, was a lot about reworking the ramping, and we looked at some innovative intersections at Zaragoza and at Hawkins in particular. And then segment 4, we looked at not only the extension of the frontage roads all the way down to FM 3380, but also the possibility of a new interchange south of the Horizon to give a little bit of relief to Horizon and Eastlake there. So those are the operational improvements that we're currently proposing to go forward with. In addition to that, we wanted to kind of layer it over top of that. We wanted to look at the corridor-wide improvements. And while we're calling these corridor-wide improvements, they really could vary from segment to segment and transition from segment to segment. Alternative one is simply an added capacity. It's essentially just adding an additional lane in each direction. That coupled with the operational improvements would address quite a bit of our issues. And there are pros and cons of this. One is, it does provide that additional capacity. However, it does take a little bit of right-of-way, and that's something that we want to be conscious of. Alternative two is what we're calling an enhanced shoulder alternative. And this serves a couple of purposes. One is it allows some flexibility for the future. If congestion increases faster than is expected or something else occurs, it provides a possibility of a peak hour lane if wanted, if desired. So it provides that possibility. But probably more importantly, it provides a good opportunity for incident management. And by providing a wider inside shoulder, it gives opportunities for addressing those issues early on. The third alternative is what we call an adaptive lane or a buffer-separated adapter lane. And alternative three is a buffer-separated adaptive lane. An adaptive lane is really a lane that can flex and be modified over time depending on what the need is. Our vision is that it could start off as a truck lane, maybe married with an express transit lane to provide good bus and predictable bus and truck movement down the corridor while not impacting and mixing with the general purpose lanes. Alternative four is the same thing, except it provides a barrier separated between it. While this is a similar alternative, it does limit where your ingress and egress, where you can get in and out of this lane at. So we want to make sure that we've addressed that as well. So all these are the four corridor wide alternatives that we're taking a look at as well. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Which one was the toll road option?
I think you'll notice I did not say the word toll road anywhere in that.
Just kidding, just
We
kidding.
didn't use that four-letter word anywhere in this.
So that kind of gets through what the overall components and of the solution of this corridor study is going to be. But I do want to focus a little bit on the downtown opportunities because downtown is a unique area. We know that there's a lot going on in the downtown area that we need to address. Not only the impacts to I-10 and how improvements might impact I-10, but how can we take a look at making this a solution work with the overall city function as well by looking at improving incident management, connecting the downtown to the uptown area, but also opportunities for a livable community and providing a more livable community. So we felt like the solution was kind of that nexus between those three and moving forward. I will caution you that the next slides that I'm going to show are really concepts, but we just kind of want to show what the possibilities are because we know that some of our solutions are a little bit outside the box, and we want to kind of make sure that's pointed out right away. We know that we took a hard look at how downtown functions and the five main areas of the downtown, and looked at some of the things that might be beneficial to try to incorporate in an overall solution. There's a lot going on downtown with the ballpark and the convention center, as well as the businesses and the historic areas that are there. And there's a lot of opportunities for good innovation and good solutions. On your screen here is what happens to the downtown area if nothing is done in 2042. You don't see a lot of movement from vehicles because there's a lot of congestion and standstill. We're talking complete congestion in the downtown area. All the roadways are going to be locked up, especially with Mesa coming down right in the middle of the downtown area and the traffic that it's going to be bringing. It really does end up congesting the entire downtown area. So we felt the only way to address this is to come up with some ideas that address the mobility, even though some of them may be a little bit on the radical side, but do address the mobility, provide good connections from the uptown to the downtown, and then also address the I-10 component as well. So the conceptual ideas I'm going to show, I have on here full cover and partial cover because some of them actually show kind of a complete tunnel under the downtown, and some of them don't show that. But all of them can be kind of incorporated in either a full cover tunnel or a partial covered tunnel as well. And the advantage of the partial cover is that you don't have to address the fire suppression and ventilation as much as you do on the full cover. So there's some things that we're considering right now. All of these are very preliminary and very conceptual, and I don't think I can say that enough times before I move on to the next slide. So the first one I'm going to show is what we call the circuit, and the circuit basically takes all the traffic in the downtown area and moves it around in a circuit using Yandell and Wyoming as a circuit. But we do have Mesa coming through the middle of it, so it looks something like this. You will notice that we have Santa Fe on the west side and Campbell on the east side continuing through. But other than Mesa, the other cross-street bridges have been removed in this area. I will point out at this point that, as Bob mentioned earlier, all of these bridges are going to have to be removed in the future anyway. So as we're doing that, we're taking a look at which ones we put back and how we put them back. And that's something we're taking a look at. But this would provide Mesa a good connection to the frontage road, still provide good circulation between uptown and downtown, and address that traffic congestion that we were showing, because this actually does work. You can see in this simulation that traffic is moving, not only on Wyoming and Yandell, but also in the arterials that are just off the corridor as well. And so it is a solution that works with the 2042 traffic. So what would this look like? And there were several different. You give architects a little leeway and they go crazy with it. So what you're going to see here is our architects kind of going crazy. So here's some ideas. With I-10 underneath, it provides an opportunity to not only maintain that circulation and but creates a lot of opportunity for amenities on the top. Whether it's active or cultural or civic, or even quiet areas, it provides a good opportunity for that. I will point out that El Paso downtown is unique because we've got actually nice squares that could be developed. So this could be done, all together. It could be done in partial pieces. Gaining momentum as funding becomes available. So there are some possibilities with that. So you end up getting with a solution that would provide a nice centerpiece for El Paso, but most importantly, it's addressing the mobility and the circulation issues that we need to address on I-10. Another one with Mesa with the circuit is a shift. It's just a variation on it. They kind of got creative on this one and a little abstract, and so it provided another concept for this to show how it might come together, where you have a farmer's market and music performance and things like that. Just, they were dreaming big and what could happen with a situation like this. Once again, providing those amenities, but addressing the mobility in the corridor as well.
Can I ask you
Sure.
a technical question?
Let me go back.
If you do, show one of those concepts. I think it's pretty unique. One reason is I-10 is depressed through there, and so you've got the two sides that are connected. And if you did some mixed use, who would own what now would be property or air rights? Would we have to buy the air rights from the state if you were to put activities where would there be actual building facilities on those overpasses? I mean, would there be revenue generating possibilities, and who owns the property?
Well, I'll let Bob answer that in a second, but I think the key is that it provides a lot of opportunity for private funding.
So, would the city go to the state and say, we'll offer you air rights, or to purchase your air rights, and we build a cultural center where you have entertainment, you're charging a fee, people come, is that how it would work?
Now, Bob, I want to speak for you.
Yeah, I since I'm not an attorney, I won't say who owns the air rights. Some people will say if you go from the center of the earth up through the corners that forever, that's what.
Well, that's
you
what I
own,
used to
but-
teach. It is. It goes up into infinity.
But I think it's something that can be worked out. It was done in Dallas, so I think we have a model that we can follow in Dallas. And I haven't talked to Kelly, so I don't know exactly how they did it, but it certainly is possible to do that.
Because even now, when somebody builds across the road, the city has the
Maintenance.
say-so on purchasing those air rights, so I just figured it would be the state. I mean, it's not a bad thing. I think it's interesting that somebody would wind up owning that, I guess you, again, call it property, you'd be creating like an island in the air.
Or you're suggesting then that TxDOT should put a toll on the use of that property?
For
I-
a decade maybe, but no longer.
One thing I
Pay
do
for
want
it
to
and then go away.
One thing I do want to point out is that decisions on whether this is going to be a full or partial cover have to be made fairly early on in the process. And the reason for that is that if it's going to be full cover, we have to go to fire suppression. If we have to go to ventilation, it's going to mean a big difference in terms of the depth
But
of
you
that
can
structure.
design this as a partial cover with the ability to develop it in phases.
Correct.
And that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, and if
Whether it
we-
never happens or not, it's there.
And if we decide to leave portions of it open forever so that we don't have to get into the other depth of structure issue, we'll be a whole lot better off.
I think it provides a lot of opportunity and a lot of opportunity for private financing as well. And that's one of the Clyde Warren Park in Dallas. That's one of the big things that they did is they got a lot of private financing to help with that and provide for that. You know, I think about, the DoubleTree Hotel sitting right there on top of it, and it's, it's really, it could be a real good amenity for them specifically among others. But
To expand.
yeah, to expand. So I mean, it really provides a good opportunity. Another alternative we're looking at is what's called the Downtown Parkway. I'm sorry, is there another question?
Yeah, we were just talking over here about, who owns all that property right now? The state, the I-10 corridor? Is that why Joe is asking about the
Yes,
area?
I mean, in technical terms, it would be,
The
yeah.
I-10 corridor right away the state owns. Under, I think, all of these options, the state would buy the right-of-way from the edge of the north edge of the right-of-way to Yandell.
But if we developed over it, we would negotiate with the state the air rights to build over
To
it.
build over it?
Right.
Okay, and if it were a full cover, where is all the downtown traffic being shifted to?
Well, that's what I was explaining earlier. The downtown traffic, while we're keeping Mesa going through, we would also have Santa Fe and Campbell going through as well. The rest of the traffic, for example, if you're coming down Oregon and you want to get to the downtown area, you would make the loop around it to get to the downtown area. Now, it's a little bit more circuitous to get there, but it's probably faster to get there because you're not going through as many traffic signals to make that maneuver. It's actually without a signal that you're making that maneuver. So it'd take a little bit of be a little bit of a different traffic pattern, but it'd probably be a faster trip around there, especially faster than the 2042 log jam that I showed you early on. So
Right, so you would have full cover, but you still have the overpass from Mesa connecting
Mesa
north
would
and
come,
south.
yeah, Mesa would come across, Campbell would come across, and Santa Fe would come across in that alternative. Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
And how about the streetcar and the tracks that go on Oregon and Stanton?
Well, streetcar is something that we are considering as far as part of the solution. As Bob mentioned, though, that any solution we do in the downtown area, we're going to have to reconstruct those bridges regardless because of the age of the structures plus with the depth that we have to deal with. So at that point, we can look at opportunities for, streetcar. Now, remember, this is, we're looking 20, 30 years down the road. So we're not talking about something that's going to happen tomorrow. This is something that's going to happen down the road. But I think at that point, if you're removing the bridge, then we can look at options. We can put the streetcar right back where it is, or we can look at routing them over to Santa Fe and Campbell or something like that, potentially even incorporating them in there. So there's a number of different scenarios on that. So
You said, one last question, you said earlier we were going to eventually have to replace the bridges, but I just heard you say we're going to reconstruct the bridges. Is that for a short-term period, and then eventually we've got to get rid of them, even as reconstructed?
Well, the issue is, I-10 is one of the major freight corridors in Texas. And the state DOT has taken the position that on the major freight corridors, we're going to provide 18.5 feet of clearance. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and a lot of it's industry-driven as to what we're going to have to move on those roadways. None of the bridges through downtown provide 18.5 feet of clearance. So they are all going to have to be replaced. Now, whether you replace them in a different location or you rebuild them by raising them, is a question. And then getting back to Jay's question, on this particular alignment, what we'd probably do is to take a look at rerouting the trolleys onto Santa Fe and onto Campbell, using both Wyoming and Yandell, so that you could keep the loop going. Or it's real difficult to bring them to the center.
Rail going through on Campbell, or I'm sorry, on Oregon and Stanton, and just keep it just for the streetcar to get through?
No, because the problem with that is it gives us, again, a crossing on Yandell and Wyoming where we would have to put some sort of lighter traffic control, and that's what we want to get away from. Now, it's also possible, and I think they're looking at options where you would grade separate, maybe raise the trolley up to a different level and then drop it back down when you get to the downtown side. So we're looking at different alternatives for that. But to be short, Jay, your trolley's a pain in our ass on this thing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You had mentioned earlier that no text funds would be utilized for this. Was that the case in Dallas?
That was. The park that they built in Dallas was private funding. Now, TxDOT can provide some because the walls that are built on the side were built to a little heavier standard to be able to be a foundation or an abutment for what goes on top. So there is some play in there.
There's also the bridge reconstruction of 18.5 feet.
Right.
Okay.
If there was a plan by the community to possibly do this type of development, we could have TxDOT design it to that level, so there would be
Correct.
bridge fund money used that ties in with future development. So there is a way that some of it would be paid
Potentially,
for by
okay.
state.
Well, and the Clyde,
But we would need to, but we would need to decide that, and I think that's probably would be a good decision to go forward, is to design it with probably a partial or full nows, so that if there is a tie-in, it's already there, but the 18.5 feet is causing a problem throughout
Oh, yeah.
the entire state, all the bridge strikes and stuff. That's the new standard. You can't even build now without it being 18.5 feet, period.
Thank you.
and the other thing that the Clyde Warren Park used also was grant money as well, and that opens up possibilities for things like that also. So there are some other pots that you could pull from.
Grant money from,
I believe the federal government,
Okay.
federal grant money, so. Going through, we had another alternative I kind of wanted to show. These are kind of the two base alternatives, and this one's called the Downtown Parkway. Essentially what it does is it takes the frontage roads of I-10 and it pulls them together into essentially a parkway that goes through through the downtown area. What this does, instead of having two signals at every cross street, it has one signal in the middle at every cross street. We'll point out that while we are showing all of them going across here, it functions better if we eliminate some of the internal ones other than Mesa, Santa Fe, and Campbell. It functions much better because you're eliminating the number of signals. But you can see that this is the Parkway alternative with the 2042 traffic, and you can see that it flows very well even on the frontage roads throughout the area. And what this might look like is, as I said, the frontage roads coming together on the top of I-10 in a parkway scenario. Now the development, instead of being right smack in the middle on top of I-10, it's really kind of to one side, but it's still the same potential development component to it that's out there. And it still provides the same possibilities for development. Our architects like to call this one the bow and arrow, I guess because it looks like a bow, sort of, I guess. But you can see that it does provide some of the same similar amenities that the other alternative had. Those are the two base alternatives. We are looking at other things, as Bob mentioned, and I wanted to kind of go over them real briefly. One of them is called what we call the Santa Fe bypass lane. Basically, it's an alternative that provides a ramp directly to Santa Fe to try to access the ballpark and the Civic Center and some other things. Provide a better connection on the west side of downtown. What we call elevated Mesa is essentially the circuit that alternative I showed you a while ago with Mesa, except Mesa is now on the third level with connections from Mesa directly to I-10 from Mesa. Instead of having to go through the frontage road component, you would go directly to I-10. So it's another one we're looking at. We also have the ramp modification, which is simply removing one of the ramps approaching from the east. This alternative doesn't solve the problem completely, but it solves it. It makes it better, and so we're looking at how that one might work. And then the last one is Mesa connectors, and this is really just direct connectors from Mesa to I-10 in an elevated section. So it'd be really a third level in the downtown area there. So those are 4 other ones we're looking at to see what possibilities those might have as well. So before I go on to the next steps, I did want to kind of point out that we have a website, www.reimaginei10.com. Some of you are aware of that. We have business cards back there on the table that have that contact information, not only my contact and Ugo's contact information, but also the website. On that website is an interactive map, and we have gotten a lot of great comments from our public meetings and our stakeholder meetings on that interactive map, where you can drop a pin and put a specific comment in a very specific place, and it really helps us to kind of drive how this corridor study is going to develop, not only in the downtown area but along the entire corridor. Plus, on the website, there's a lot of good information, including the presentation materials we use at the public meetings and some of the videos that we have that we've developed as well. So next steps, we just had our second round of public meeting outreach meetings. Right now we're in the mode where we're refining alternatives to come up with that overall end-to-end solution that we want to present at a third round of public outreach meetings sometime late in the summer. And at that point, we'll get feedback on it. We'll address comments. We'll modify them and come to the finish of the study sometime in the summer of 2020. Even though that includes the full implementation plan, we'll have the overall solution identified well before that. So, with that, that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
A couple
Sure.
of questions. On the operational improvements, I know this is a bigger plan. We're talking 30 years. It would be great to have this stuff over downtown. A few short years ago, we never heard of a Texas turnaround where you got off an exit, you wanted to go the opposite side. Now we develop them to where you have a free flow U-turn. Some of the operational improvements, can we, Bob, work these in, some of the stuff that's happening regardless, the improvements that you're doing now in the Hawkins Airway area? Because as far as traffic, it's my understanding, the most traffic anywhere in Interstate 10 is still like Bassett Center. That's the most traffic. Even though this is a corridor, as Bob said, if you do the traffic counts at the New Mexico line and you do the traffic counts at Hudspeth, they're less than half of what it is internally.
Yeah, there's a lot of
these
local traffic.
operational, and you had a slide, I don't know if you can go back to one that kind of showed maybe some of the things that their engineers have finally come up with that are a little different now, that are free flow and.
You're talking about
Well, to get to your question directly, one of the things that we are looking at is short-term improvements. And those short-term improvements are a lot of the ramp changes that we're talking about. And that means not only removing some ramps, but taking a look, where can we shift, for example, from a diamond ramp to an X-ramp configuration? Can we move that merge?
Do you have an X-ramp up there?
We don't, well, it's kind of up there in one of those drawings, but it may be kind of difficult to see. Go back to
Because Spur 601 on Fort Bliss is where kind of the first time a different type of intersection design was done.
Right.
Is
Well,
that-
that's the divergent diamond in.
that's good, right? To use.
But what we're doing on 54 today, between Hondo Pass and Trans Mountain, we are switching those ramps from diamond configuration to X configuration. The whole idea behind that is to move all of that merge traffic to the frontage roads instead of the main lane. And that does a couple of things. It makes those merges at a slower speed. It also takes some of that friction off the main lane, which effectively gives us additional capacity on the main lanes and makes it a little bit safer. So that's part of what they're looking at throughout this entire area. And yes, those ramp projects where we can split them out or do 3 or 4 or a segment of those are going to be the short-term projects that we're talking about.
And those aren't necessarily going to show up in our TIP plan here. These are things that you, as the district, can do, Bob, or are they?
Well, some of them, if we do them with category 1, they won't necessarily show up in the TIP. But if we do them as category 11, which is district discretionary, they will show up in the TIP. So there'll be a mixture of those two.
Because like coming from the east side, getting off here at downtown, it's one of the few exits that has, dual lane exits. And when I go back on the east side, it's like, you get off at Airway and it's a single exit. You've got 2 lanes turning left, 1 going straight, 1 to the right. And I mean, are we going to take all that into consideration in the new type of designs?
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
ramps?
as I mentioned earlier, every intersection, we're looking at how to make it more efficient. It could be as simple as
It
adding
got
a
a little
through.
scary there. You're talking like taking away, I don't know, what was it? 87?
Yeah, well, 37.
Moving 77.
We only have
and
88
taking away
ramps.
35.
You're taking away 87 of them, and you're going to make one big one?
Well, that makes mobility very easy then, so. no.
It's 35, I think, not 87.
Yeah, no, but, it's consolidating, it's making the intersections function more efficiently. That's the idea. And it could be as simple as adding a through lane or a right turn lane, or it could be what you're talking about, those innovative intersections, the single point urban interchanges, that's kind of what's shown on that image, that inset image there, or a diverging
Yeah, that's real
diamond.
clear.
Or a diverging diamond like they have at the 601, 375 that you were talking about as well. I think there's another one there, but we are looking at all those possibilities as solutions to the problem.
So what's the next step to communicate with TxDOT on, again, going back to the downtown, that's kind of the crucial future plan of getting the bridge designs, Bob, that could accommodate those outlandish ones if need be? Is there a way to get that in the plan? Because they need to be in your plans.
Yeah. Well, we've put, is it
I said
500?
outlandish was kind. I mean,
Yeah.
I like that. I'm just saying, if we do that, it would be crazy to go back and try to fix it. We should design what's coming up regardless.
Right. We have 500 million today in for downtown, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a start. What I really need to do is with the help of everybody in this room and the chamber and everybody else, make that case in Austin and to the commission. But we also need to have a good estimate of what that is going to cost and what the different variations are going to cost. And that's one of the things the team's going to be working on pretty hard right now, because there's a gap. 500 million isn't going to cut it.
No, but as far as your design goes, it's not going to be that much different designing these bridges and overpasses at 18.5 feet to later tie in to being this partial tunnel. Can't they be designed?
Well, we have to be careful, because when you raise them in the center, that also has an effect on the two edges.
You
Now,
have to do that anyway.
the uphill side doesn't have much effect, the downhill side does, and it depends on whether we're in a circuit, it depends on whether we go to the parkway concept. So we need to have that concept established first, and then we can design the bridges, and then we can decide what we're gonna leave out, if we're gonna leave something out of there so that we don't have to go deep. Those are the kinds
So
of
both the
things.
city and the county have transportation plans that they vote on. If the city and the county were to adopt, for instance, a plan that does a, partial tunnel with future development, then the state would have to react to us having those as a local part of our plan.
Right, and what we're attempting to do here is to give you something that you can vote on, that you can decide, hey, this is what we really want.
All right, I vote aye.
I have a question. We're already getting a lot of congestion coming from Pete Domenici into the interstate. What's the plan to fix that mess?
Okay, that'll be wrapped into this plan, but we do have a separate study going on right now with R-178, your Pete Domenici, and the Artcraft interchange. And very frankly, the only thing that's going to work in the long run are going to be direct connects at that interchange, because the blades that are being shipped out of there are simply too long to get through even a spooey. If we go to a spooey, the longer blades aren't even going to make it through it. So a spooey might be a short term, but we are getting pretty close to the end of that study. I think, Ugo, you're also managing that one. So he's the connection between the two studies. So all questions on that go to Ugo. Oh, I'm sorry, single point urban interchange. We don't have any of those in El Paso at the moment. We will. Border West.
We want one, we demand one.
The intersection being developed at Border West and Executive Center is a SPUI, a single point urban interchange. That'll be the first one we have in El Paso.
So when are we looking at doing something about this issue? That's my real
Well, if
question.
somebody would give me $4 billion, I'd get started on it tomorrow.
Didn't we turn down some projects last month so you can pull some of that to do this $4 million project? Huh?
It's okay with me.
Thank you. I have a question about the 18-wheelers, trucks. In these plans, is there anything to divert those trucks, make sure those trucks aren't coming through the downtown portion?
Well, our traffic model does include the impacts of the Border West and the Northeast Parkway. But one of the things that we have specifically in this project is that adaptive lane that I was talking to you about, that it allows an opportunity for those trucks to be moved out of the general purpose and have a separate lane. If they're going all the way through, it kind of gets them out of the general mix of traffic and provides another way for them to get all the way through the corridor. So that's how we're kind of addressing that.
There is no way to totally eliminate them from coming in through the downtown trench?
The short answer to your question is no. We don't have the opportunity geographically to put them someplace else. We just don't have that room. I explained to the group yesterday that between the front door of UTEP and the border, we have 1,200 feet. And in that 1,200 feet, we have a U.S. highway, Route 85 or Paisano. We have an interstate highway, I-10. We have two mainline railroads. And we're building a toll road in that 1,200 feet. So that we're out of room. We just don't have that opportunity. Now, one of the things that has happened, and they've noticed it in this study, is that the industry recognizes some of the problems on I-10. And during peak hours, we only have about 10% trucks on I-10. During non-peak hours, we're up to what, about 50% trucks.
Yeah, I see them.
So that is happening. We're also feeling the effects of UP moving their facility from the Dallas yard out to Santa Teresa, because now we have a lot more traffic between downtown and Artcraft, truck traffic, than we used to have. UP has been talking about putting a multimodal facility out in the same general area. Well, that's going to increase that truck traffic again. So it's a dynamic environment. We're trying to do a lot of things, but we have very little space.
Yeah.
do
Two questions. The Anthony Gap bypass, I don't know what the status of that is, but that was intended to help move some of the truck traffic from coming downtown, right?
Well, right, and New
so-
Mexico DOT and our office, working with the RMA, we're working on a potential project where we can go for some special federal funding to implement that. So we're working together on that right now.
Still working on the funding. Are there incentives or penalties or anything of that nature that would encourage the truckers to go around downtown?
That sounds like a toll. You two might want to talk about that.
Okay.
The incentive to me is non-tolled, and we're removing that from our plan.
Yeah.
I mean, the environmental is going on, and the design is for is it Super 2 in each direction right now?
Initially, it would be Super 2, right, and eventually going to 4-lane.
And that, it'll always help, but, you know, if a lot of the traffic is us, I mean, you get a lot of the through truck traffic off, but candidly, you know, and without pointing at some projects that I'm not a big fan of, it pushed this way, way, way down the list because of other projects that we
Something
chose
connected
in
to
this
tracks,
community.
perhaps?
Yeah, because at one time, we could have done that was our number one priority probably 8 years ago. When we went to the commission and when the time of earmarks in Congress, our congressional delegation always had that as a major priority, and it dropped considerably. And thank goodness we still had priorities like Purple Heart, which made a big difference for Fort Bliss, and that expansion. In fact, Fort Bliss, you know, the Department of Justice has said if it wasn't for Purple Heart and the desalinization plant, we wouldn't have had the expansion. But it's time we put some more emphasis back on the.
And it is even more
bypass.
complex than that, because it's not only the Borderland Expressway, which I think is what we're calling it now, something like that. But if you actually go over and build the Mesa connection, in other words, go from 136 up that bluff in the Mesa and come across and tie into 404, that would be a better route for those trucks at the bypass than getting onto I-10 at Artcraft. So that can have an effect, but that's even further down the line, and Trent's got some environmental issues with
Bob,
that
what's
one, I
the,
think.
just so everybody has it in their mind, what's the cost of a Super 2 that's being planned for the Northeast bypass?
300, roughly 300 million, 330
So
million.
it's actually a very doable number, and I don't know about another name with border, and it's gonna be kind of confusing, which border,
That's the idea, to
Border
keep
Highway
people
West.
confused.
we just need more spuies, that's all I know.
Joe figured non-tolled highway.
Spuies. And Bob brought it up, and so did Representative Blanco, because I keep getting asked, I got asked yesterday, I mean, I think people still don't realize that the Border Highway West project is not like Cesar Chavez, where there was one dedicated lane. This thing is an entirely tolled project, and again, if you want to alleviate congestion, it shouldn't be, because we all know that there will be people that choose to do that, but the majority, overwhelming majority, will choose not to. So we're not helping congestion by it being proposed as a toll, and I'm going to remind everybody, because I took some flack in Austin the last couple days from my out-of-area colleagues. I brought up that there is no debt that the RMA owes on this project. It was a full $630 million, check was written, so there's not even a need for a toll on that project. We don't need to pay off any debt. There's a lot of hoops to jump through, a lot of technicalities, there's a lot of problems with the financing, but the bottom line is we don't have to worry about, well, how would we come up with money to pay off the debt? There is no debt on Border Highway West, zero.
Good point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Going back to the alternatives, how long ago did Dallas actually act and do the tunnels, the covers? Was this done a long time ago?
No, it was, I don't know the exact implementation date, but it was probably, I want to say they opened it up maybe 5 years ago, 5 to 6 years ago. So it's a relatively recent, you're talking about the deck park itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fairly recent. It's just, if you're familiar with Dallas, it's just on the north side of downtown, connects the downtown area to the uptown area, much like this one would do for El Paso, so.
And when would you, estimate that this board would actually be making that decision after the public comment is over, as to what alternative and where we want to head?
Well, as soon as we can get something in front of you, the sooner the better. Because I really have to have the local support, both the political support and the business support, to go to the commission to try to get the funding. So that's one of the reasons that Brian didn't have any gray hair when this study started. So, and the reason he's getting gray now is I'm pushing him. I've got to get that information, those costs, out as early as possible, because we have some opportunity right now with the confusion over the UT. I'll leave it at confusion. Is that okay, Chairman?
Because they took all the toll projects in the rest of the state out of the plan. So there's a couple $2 billion sitting there unallocated.
So we have an opportunity
To
at this
take
point.
advantage of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a request for public comment. So bound by the 3-minute rule.
Can you put that chart up on the screen, please? Mike Rooney, thank you. Your crazy concepts weren't that nutty after all, and I'll tell you why. And plus, Mr. Bielik set the parameters. He says he's not going to pay for the roof over the highway, so we've had a good discussion. Plus, I was watching the TV screen. I can't see Representative Pickett, and his mental wheels were twisting all through the discussion on where can he pull this money out of, just in case our community said they would like to go with one of these concepts. The blue area, that's kind of a kernel, or that's kind of former Mayor Caballero's idea, but just transposed to another area. His idea was a Central Park. I think Susie Bird and possibly Veronica Escobar, when they were staffers, worked on it. It was to take the railroad going all the way down to Lincoln Center. If you could take the railroad tracks out, we could have a Central Park. So basically, this seems like it's a Central Park down in the middle of town. And during one of our mini arena vigorous debates that go on in El Paso for an arena, former Mayor Francis says, well, we could just pave over the top of the I-10 and build our arena there. So your concepts weren't really that nutty after all. Mr. Bielik, I enjoyed the presentation. I attended one of the much earlier ones at Viscount Community Center. That was probably well over a year ago. So to see things laid out, it's darn interesting. At that time, you had the whole route laid out. What is it, from the border to Tornillo? Sections of it, plenty of staffers were available to take you through it. It had problem areas. You can make all the comments you wanted. At one time, I was talking to you. You said you had to rebuild downtown area. I don't know how from downtown, how far, but you said in today's dollars, you were talking about $1.5 to $2 billion. I mean, just a lot of loot. So I see why you want to get this out and let people know what's going on. I understand. By asking some discreet questions, I understand a trolley issue might come up next month. A trolley expansion from the connection downtown, possibly over to UMC. We don't even have our current trolley up. There are many citizens that wonder, is our Mr. Bielik's daily passenger riderships numbers are correct? Are we going to have a white elephant, or I'm sorry, Chase, are we going to have a white elephant and the taxpayers are going to pick it up? I sure hope it's successful there. And great briefing. Thanks for laying out the money constraints. Thanks for giving us a variety of interesting ideas to think about. We're talking out, what, 2035 or?
For the entire study.
Yeah, so thank you.
Any other questions by the board? Seeing none. I remind everybody that the next TBB meeting is on May 18th, 2018 at 9 a.m. Is there a motion to adjourn? There is a motion to adjourn. The motion has been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.